So, let me ask you this. First of all, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Brendan Fay. I'm a gay activist, a filmmaker. I'm from Ireland. And
I've known Brendan for years. I caught up with him last week at a gay pride march in New York's Greenwich Village.
So you and I are standing right here on the Hudson River. The sun is just set over in New Jersey. What is the significance of why we're here right now tonight?
we are standing here right on the piers of New York City. From the time of Stonewall in 1969 and before and since, lesbian, gay men, bisexual, transgender people would come from all over the world and knew that the piers in New York City, just below Christopher Street, was the place to meet our kind.
If you're unfamiliar with Greenwich Village, Christopher Street runs from 6th Avenue down to the pier on the Hudson River on Manhattan's west side. It's also the home to the Stonewall Inn, which back in the 1960s was the only gay bar in the city where dancing was allowed. In those days, police raids were common. On June 28, 1969, undercover cops raided the bar, and things turned violent. Word spread, riot police arrived and clamped down on a growing crowd. A series of riots ensued over several days, and this ignited a nascent gay liberation movement. A year later, activists across the country marched to mark the Stonewall riots' anniversary. And this was the basis for gay pride events that now happen every June. In 2016, President Obama declared the Stonewall Inn and Christopher Park just across the street as the Stonewall National Monument, and it's part of the National Park Service.
You see, unlike other people who know they can meet one another anywhere where they grow up and where they live, if you're gay, you have to think about where can you meet people like you. And you see, that's often still misunderstood. Why do we need places like this? Why do we need places that become known as gay bars? Because you know what? We still cannot be ourselves wherever we grow up. And that's why we've so much work to do. So when I come to a place like this, and as we did tonight when we raised the rainbow flag against the New York skyline, it represents our movement. All those who've gone before us, a generation in fact who came here and died here during the AIDS crisis, and some who lost their lives to violence, some who the pain got so much that they could not bear it any longer and ended their own lives. How many were hospitalized? We're told they were, which we were, that it was a mental illness. When I came to this country, homosexuality in the Ireland that I left in 1984 was a criminal offense. The America I arrived in also made it that I could have been denied entry to the country simply for being gay. I think we have only turned a corner as human beings on this issue.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them. It's the podcast where we tell stories from America's cultural divides. I'm Trey Kay. So June marks Gay Pride Month, and across the country, parades and festivals celebrate the progress of gay rights. But they also highlight the ongoing struggle against discrimination and hate crimes. As my friend Brendan pointed out, homosexuality has been criminalized and diagnosed as a medical illness, both by medical professionals as well as family members.
She thought I was sick. She said, "Oh, it's just terrible. Living in sin and all those other things." You know, she just was horrible.
That's Bill Richards. He's a floral designer in Charleston, West Virginia, and he's telling me about a conversation he had a long time ago with his mother about him being gay.
One time she said, "I'd just like to know one thing. Just what do two men do together?" And I said, "I don't think you want to hear that." And she said, "I asked you a question." I said, "All right, you're going to get an answer." And I gave her a full-blown description of every kind of sex you could have. And she never asked another question ever again.
I hadn't seen Bill in over 30 years. I knew him when I was a teenager, and I'd worked delivering flowers for a florist. Bill worked in the back room cutting and arranging flowers. He was a really nice guy with a great wit. I remember him keeping everyone entertained with jokes he'd crack. Bill was one of the first out gay men that I knew back then. Well, he was as out as much as one could be back in those days. A couple of years ago, I went to the flower shop in Charleston where Bill works these days.
We can just sit right down here over this table.
Okay. Bill grew up in Raynell, West Virginia, which is a town I know well because that's where my grandmother was from. It's a little tiny place that you get to after driving a long way over West Virginia mountains on switchback roads. Growing up in Raynell, Bill knew that he was different from the other boys.
When I was just a little tiny toddler, they told me how I used to, and my grandparents had flowered linoleum on their floors, and I used to get a brown paper bag and go around and pretend to be picking the flowers and putting them in my bag. And then I would always go out and pick dandelions and bring them in the house. And anything I found blooming, I'd be dragging them into my grandmother, especially, because I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And the only person in my family I ever heard say a derogative thing about me was my great-grandmother. And she said, that little sissy needs to be taken care of. She said, you all are just making a bigger sissy out of it.
Oh, and before we go any further, I think I should let you know that this program has some pretty blunt language about sex. So if you're listening with children or are uncomfortable with this kind of talk, heads up.
I had never had any problem. I had sex with girls, quite frequently, and I just thought that was the way things went. And when you're young and dumb and full of cum, you proceed with that. So anyway, I read a lot, paperbacks. So I was at the drugstore and I saw this paperback that said City of Night. Well, I picked it up and I read the foreword and I said, oh my gosh, I've got to have this.
City of Night was written by John Recchi and published back in 1963. It's about the travels of a young man, we never learn his name, but he makes his way around America as a hustler, and he has trysts with a bunch of peculiar characters. The book was popular in the 1960s. Some say that Jim Morrison of The Doors was influenced by it. But back in Raynell, West Virginia, City of Night was resonating with young Bill Richards in a major way.
And I flew over to the flower shop and I jumped into that book and read it before midnight was that night. The book was absorbed, and it was about gay life in the city.
Bill says when he was a teenager, he had sex with girls and boys. He just thought he was a sexual guy. But after reading City of Night, he had a clearer understanding of who he was. He started making trips to Charleston and over to Richmond, Virginia, the closest thing to the cities described in the book. He went looking for gay bars, and in one of these joints, he met someone.
So I met this guy in Richmond, and he was moving to Chicago. Well, I just sold everything I had, was on my way to Chicago.
Bill says that he and this guy were like country boys in the big city. Their relationship ended quickly, and soon thereafter, Bill says he was hot on the scene in the town's gay clubs.
So I was there about 6 months. When I'd run out of my money, I'd call my parents, and they'd send me a little money. And so finally, one day, I asked them to send me some money. Well, when I went to Western Union to get the money, they said, well, your parents are at your apartment. So I go home, and they're there, and they have me packed up and said, you're going back to West Virginia. Well, I didn't have much choice. I came back. Before I was going to Chicago, my dad said to me, and this is terrible, but it's the only way he knew how to say it. He said, just because you're a queer doesn't mean you can't make me proud that you're my son. And he said, I'm never going to say anything to your mother. Well, she figured it out. So while I was in Chicago, we'd talk on the phone, and she'd say, you're living a life of sin, and you're going to go to hell, and you're driving me crazy, and so on.
Bill says after his mother discovered he was gay, she'd constantly mail him clippings from Billy Graham newsletters, stuff about homosexuality being a sin.
I've had so many Billy Graham clippings and preacher clippings and things that I should have saved them. People thought you were sick. She thought I was sick. When I came back here, that was the same thing. Every time I'd hear from her or see her, it was that same old song and dance. So
that you're full of sin, and that you got to repent and change your ways.
Yeah, and then so I started dating Ann, and
who's Ann?
Ann, well, she's the girl I married, and started dating her, and so I decided to get married. Maybe that would settle things down a little bit. And, of course, my mother was thrilled to death that I was going to get married. That still doesn't change your feelings, deep down inside your feelings, And Ann knew that I had fooled around, and she was fine with it, she said, We had a pretty happy 6 or 8 months, And then I started slipping off a lot, coming to Charleston, stay overnight and so on. So then we had a son, Michael, came along, and so it wasn't too long after that I knew I just couldn't handle it anymore. But by that time she said, well, just bring Frankie up here to the house. If you're going to see him, bring him up here. You need to be here at the house,
Frankie was the man that Bill was seeing at the time.
So I did. And so then, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks went by or something, and one day I just said to her, Ann, it doesn't matter how much sex we have. You can't, you could wear me out sexually, but mentally, my sexual desires are not fulfilled. So I said, I'm going to leave. And we talked about it, and she agreed. I packed up stuff, got in the car, and she drove me to Charleston and dropped me off at Frankie's house. Well, about 3 weeks later, I was out at Clendenin working in another little flower shop, helping them do a wedding for a friend of mine. And the state police came in the door at the flower shop, and they said they'd like to see William Robert Richards. And so I went out there, and they had a warrant for my arrest for sodomy.
Coming up, Bill explains his connection to a 1970s made-for-TV movie starring Joanne Woodward and Sally Field.
Dr. Wilbur said from day one, she said, I truly believe that you are born a homosexual. And she is the woman that convinced my mother that to be gay was normal for me.
We'll also hear about Bill's relationship with his son, Michael, who was told that his father was dead. I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them, which is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
In the mid to late 1960s, West Virginia, like most other states, had laws that considered certain sexual acts to be criminal. These sex acts were deemed to be unnatural or immoral and fell under the catch-all term sodomy. These laws varied greatly from state to state and were usually vague on the specifics that constituted sodomy. Generally, it was understood that sodomy meant oral and anal sex, but only when gay people did these things, not necessarily straight people.
So they gave me the choice of either being prosecuted or going to the Weston State Hospital.
If you had been prosecuted, what would that have meant?
Well, I think at the time they said I'd probably spend at least 10 years in prison. 10 to 15 or something like that.
Prior to 1962, sodomy was a felony in every state, punished by a long prison term and possibly hard labor. After 62, most states started to dial down the punishments, but not all did. In Idaho, a conviction could earn a life sentence. Michigan had a maximum sentence of 15 years for first offenders, life for repeat offenders. When Bill was before a judge in 1966, West Virginia still had stiff sentences.
It was enough to scare you and shake you up pretty good, so you think, well, it'd be easier just to go away to the crazy house.
Did you think you were crazy?
No, I knew I wasn't crazy. But I thought I'll just go right on up there rather than go to jail because they, well, I thought I'd be out of there and zip, I didn't know they were going to slam me in maximum security for 3 months, which was just like going to prison, really.
The crazy house that Bill is referring to is the Weston State Mental Hospital. It's an enormous Gothic building that has sections that predate the Civil War. And even though it wasn't a prison, the place has kind of a scary look. It's right out of a horror film. The kind of a place you'd imagine Dr. Frankenstein doing experiments.
There was like 4 huge dormitories. They're large. I'd say 25 in a dormitory. And those were all people from Moundsville prison, from petty thieves to murderers, lifers. And for most part, they were everybody was good to me.
But so nobody ever mistreated you while you were in maximum security?
No, not me. They didn't. I saw a lot of other people get mistreated, but I was never mistreated by anyone. Not the, I might have got a cat call or two, but never anything serious. If I hadn't have lucked out through Vista Workers and got to meet Dr. Cornelius Wilbur, I could still be there. People wound up spending a lifetime in those places.
Actually, Bill couldn't still be at Weston today because the institution shut down in 1994. Today, the place has reverted to its original name, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and is now open to the public as a museum. The new owners stage a lot of paranormal events and all-night ghost tours on the facility grounds. But back when Bill was there, he says that he was helped by Vista Workers. If you don't know what that is, they're volunteers who fight poverty. Vista is like the Peace Corps, but the volunteers work in the U.S. and not overseas. But did you catch that name, Dr. Cornelia Wilbur? The doctor that the Vista Workers introduced Bill to?
They're everywhere. No, you keep them away from me. I will do it. I will do it.
Back in the 1970s, Sally Field starred in a movie about a woman who'd been diagnosed with multiple personality disorder. Dr. Cornelia Wilbur was the real-life psychologist who worked with the woman known as Sybil.
Sybil? I hate Sybil. I hate her. Who are you?
And Dr. Wilbur was superintendent at Weston Hospital when Bill was there.
When you mentioned her name, I knew her as being famous. What did you know about her?
I had no clue except Joe, the Vista worker, told me that she had a book that she had collaborated with a lot of people on. And actually, Joe brought me the book to read right while I was there in the hospital, which I read, and it had everybody's views on what where they had done this psychoanalytic study of homosexuality. But I had no idea that she had done Sybil and all those things at all.
And what was she like? Describe what it was like being
Well,
with her.
if you ever saw the movie Sybil, Joanne Woodward was her made over. I swear to you, looks and everything. When that movie came out, I thought, how in the world could anybody look so much like her and move so much like her?
Yeah, you asked your father about seeing me. What happened? What did he say? Sybil?
I talked to her many times. I almost had open door access to her because I turned a lot of things in that were going on at the facilities, wrong things. And so I almost had open door policy with her. And so she would let me go out to where the Vista workers lived for cookouts and things, which I was lucky about that, that she would give me a pass to be out for 4 hours or something like that in the evenings. But she made you feel so very good, I can't explain just how to go sit down and talk with somebody that's that intelligent and that can tell you about yourself, who you are and where you are, and then you sit back and realize that, she's telling you the really truth that you've been trying to kick out of your head.
So everybody had been telling you, your mother and everybody else, that you're gay, it's wrong, it's a sin.
Yeah.
You need to go to some place to kind of work out this pathology that's within you. And Dr. Wilbur said something different.
Oh, no, Dr. Wilbur said from day one, she said, I truly believe that you are born a homosexual. And she is the woman that convinced my mother that to be gay was normal for me. After that, my mother never sent another Billy Graham clipping, never did another thing. She was fine. It was just like the preacher had told her or something, because that was her. And from then on, there was never a problem. And, I had lovers, and she was totally accepting. And like I had a black lover, and which you would have thought would never work. Took him home all the time. My brother-in-law once said, she invited us up for Thanksgiving. My brother-in-law said, I'm not going to eat at a table with a nigger. And my mother said, well, I guess you won't be having dinner, will you? So, no, it changed her whole aspect on everything. And my last lover I had, we were together 15 years, and my mother loved him so much, and she insisted he be in her obituary, even though we had split up, and he certainly was in her obituary.
Basically, you're saying that transformation really was caused by by Dr. Cornelius?
Absolutely was. There was no other way about it. It was just like day and night.
It was Dr. Wilbur who got Bill released from Weston State Hospital. It took about 6 months, but she told the sheriff that Bill wasn't insane and that they either needed to charge him or let him go.
And they took me back to Summersville, and the sheriff said I was free to go, and they never wanted to see me in Nicholas County again.
So Bill moved to Charleston, West Virginia, and made a life for himself, apart from his wife and son. He found the job as a floral designer and began to mix in with the underground gay culture there. Bill is now in his 70s, and he's seen the town become more and more accepting to gay and lesbian people. He lost many friends during the AIDS crisis. About 20 years ago, he helped start the gay pride celebrations in Charleston. Why? Because he's proud of being gay, and he loves where he comes from.
I've visited plenty of places and really enjoy it when I go and visit. But to live there, I'd have to be a millionaire to just go to the shows I want to go to and to do all the things I want to do.
So here in West Virginia, it's more your speed.
Yeah. Overall, I like the laid backness of it, the friendliness of people.
And things have evolved. Things have changed.
Oh, very much. My God, I mean, I've lived so many things. The AIDS crisis, I've lived through it all. I mean, it's just, it's had its real ups and its real downs.
Bill's divorce from Ann was certainly one of the downs. A stipulation in their divorce agreement was that Bill would never have contact with his son. He abided by that. Ann told their son, Michael, that Bill had died in Vietnam.
Finally, the last part of his teenage years, she did admit to him that, that was a good person. She never did say gay. She said, very talented man. But meantime, he had just kind of figured it out in his mind that I was gay, with a little bit of help from some cousins.
A couple of years ago, Bill got a phone call, and it was his son. He's talked with Michael a bit over the years, and they've connected somewhat, but they've never really gotten close.
Okay, so the circumstances were what they were, but if you could go back and do it again, would you want to have a relationship with him?
Probably, now that I've met him and everything, I probably would have, but it was like getting out of a cage to be able to be gay and be free and be gay,
And that was kind of like a necessary thing that you would have to give up to kind of live.
To just live the life I wanted to live.
Bill's story is an example of the complicated history we've been through over the past 50 or 60 years, and how much acceptance for gay and lesbian people has grown, really at a rapid pace. I mean, we've come a long way from policing the sexual conduct of two consenting adults and bundling gay people off to the booby hatch for violating so-called sodomy laws.
Even though in some countries, homosexuality is still a death sentence, other nations have made significant progress, like my friend Brendan Fay's home country of Ireland.
In July 1993, homosexuality was decriminalized. Then in May 22nd, 2015, the people of Ireland went to the polls and voted to change the marriage laws of Ireland to extend civil marriage to same-sex couples. And today, here we go, June 14, 2017, the Irish Parliament voted Leo Varadkar, an openly gay man, age 38, leader of the Fine Gael party, as an Taoiseach of Ireland, the Irish Prime Minister. It's a proud, proud day. Change is possible. It's extraordinary. And that is what I love and feel, the spirit of the movement. Born here outside the Stonewall Bar. It's in the Stonewall riots where people said enough. And it took people across the United States, in fact, to speak back to the American Psychiatric Association and say, enough, we are not sick. It's your prejudice, your homophobia, which is the sickness that needs treatment, not us. And they turned it around. There are people working in churches, in religious circles, in mosques, in synagogues, and saying, no, we are not sinners. We are beautiful human beings. And our impulse to love is a gift and a grace, not just for us, but for all of you. And we are rising up, and we will continue to rise up. We will meet one another in places like the piers at the bottom of Christopher Street. We will meet, we will find one another, we will hold one another close. We will care and hug and embrace those who've gone before us, because we know they carry so much pain within them.
You've been listening to Us and Them. This episode was produced by me, Trey Kay, Lori Stern, and Mitch Hanley. Joni Deutsch is our digital producer. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Rita Krisofi and Mariana Trafimova designed our website at usandthempodcast.com and provide us with images for the web. Our intern is Nicholas Tantillo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.